What's wrong?
Nothing.
You seem sad.
Oh, a little. I was just thinking about how nice it is to live in a free country.
It is. Now why does that make you sad?
That part I love. What makes me sad is learning about some of the dictators who oppress people in other parts of the world.
I see. Yes, we are very lucky to live in a democratic society.
Have you ever heard of Manuel Noriega?
Oh, yes. He was the first leader of a foreign government to face criminal charges in an American court of law.
I heard that. He was a dictator, right?
Yes, he was the former dictator of Panama, with quite a story.
Let's hear it.
Manuel Noriega's rise to power began in 1966 when he started working as an intelligence officer in the Panamanian National Guard. During this time, he was sent to the School of the Americas in Fort Benning, near Columbus, Georgia, where he received training in such topics as counterintelligence and jungle warfare. After Omar Torrijos became president of Panama in a 1968 coup, Noriega was appointed chief of military intelligence due to his fierce loyalty to the president. President Torrijos, who remained in power until 1981, was heralded for negotiating the release of the Panama Canal from the United States.
So far, he sounds like a good guy rising quickly up the ranks.
He certainly was rising quickly up the ranks. He had advanced from captain to lieutenant colonel in just 1.5 years, but his methods of enforcement were beginning to be questioned.
Oh, I didn't know about that. What was he doing?
Stories began to circulate involving Noriega's tactics of intimidation, blackmail, harassment, and even murder of those who opposed the government. However, despite his methods, the U.S. intelligence services still considered Noriega a valuable asset.
Really? Why?
The U.S. intelligence and counterintelligence operations had trained him. In fact, he was on the United States payroll for many years.
What? The U.S. was paying him? What for?
Noriega allowed the CIA to establish listening posts in Panama. He also supplied weapons to the U.S.-backed Contras in their war against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And he supposedly did much to help in the war against drugs. However, that is somewhat controversial.
Why?
His involvement in drugs was two-sided. While publicly seizing drugs and organized raids, Noriega privately facilitated the influx of drugs into the United States.
I see. So, he was like a double agent, kind of?
Yes, he was. He would order a crackdown on money laundering by the Colombian cartel, but then launder his own payoffs received from drug lords into his secret French bank account.
And he could do all that as chief of military intelligence?
No. In 1983, shortly after President Torrijos died in a plane crash, Noriega became a general in the National Guard, effectively making him the de facto ruler of Panama. It's interesting to note that he chose not to be president, but preferred instead to remain the leader of the military, which he now called the Panama Defense Forces, or PDF. The PDF controlled immigration, airports, customs, and more.
Sounds like a less publicly scrutinized position with lots of opportunities to pursue illegal activities.
Very observant of you, Stryker. And as a result, Noriega's relationship with the U.S. began to deteriorate. Intelligence officials started to suspect that Noriega was also selling intelligence to other groups, such as Cuba's Fidel Castro. In 1987, 25% of Panama City's population marched in protest of Noriega's refusal to allow Diaz-Herrera, his second-in-command, to take over as the new leader of the military. Herrera accused Noriega of rigging elections, murdering his former boss, President Torrijos, by planting a bomb on his plane, and drug trafficking. Noriega charged Herrera with treason. The U.S. Senate then asked Noriega to step down until Herrera could be tried. However, Noriega refused. A riot outside the U.S. Embassy ensued, and the U.S. Senate suspended all payments to Noriega and military assistance to Panama. In 1988, Noriega was also indicted in a U.S. court on charges of turning Panama into a shipping platform for South American cocaine that was destined for the U.S. and allowing drug proceeds to be hidden in Panamanian banks. The U.S. tried to solve these issues diplomatically, but Noriega refused to cooperate.
I'll say, he was making quite a mess. What did the U.S. do?
Well, on December 20th, 1989, shortly before 1 a.m., U.S. President George Bush secretly sent 7,000 troops into Panama to join the 13,000 troops already there. Their mission was to capture General Noriega, who then took refuge at the Vatican's embassy in Panama City. After a 2-week standoff, General Noriega surrendered. Operation Just Cause, which ultimately involved 27,000 U.S. troops, was a success, but it resulted in the death of approximately 500 Panamanians and 23 U.S. service members.
That's a lot of people.
It could have been a lot worse, but thankfully, General Noriega had no idea what was about to happen to him, so he did little to prepare. Such preparations might have resulted in many more casualties. General Noriega had become a prisoner of war. He was then flown to Miami, where he was arraigned on the charges a grand jury had returned 2 years earlier. September 5th, 1991, the trial began. Noriega, dressed in his uniform, faced 10 charges of drug trafficking, money laundering, and racketeering. Prosecutor Michael Sullivan began by calling Noriega a small man in a general's uniform who gave his permission, authorization, and encouragement to a scheme to transform his nation into an international cocaine trafficking center. Witnesses included Floyd Carlton and Lieutenant Colonel Luis Del Cid, who took the stand in return for lighter sentences. Carlton testified he flew shipments of drugs for the general, while Lieutenant Del Cid described himself as Noriega's errand boy, bodyguard, and bagman.
What was Noriega's defense?
For starters, the lead defense attorney, Frank Rubino, attacked Del Cid, saying he agreed to testify only after the government promised to reduce his sentence.
And what did the lieutenant say to that?
Lieutenant Del Cid simply replied,
Creo que todos
I
quieren
think
algo.
everyone wants something. Noriega's lawyers also tried to convince the jury that the CIA knew what he was doing. However, proof of Noriega's connections to the CIA were kept from the jury.
So, what did they decide?
The jury found Manuel Noriega guilty on 8 of the 10 counts brought against him.
And what sort of sentence did he receive?
Well, before sentencing, General Noriega, who had remained silent throughout his trial, was asked if he wanted to say something.
And did he?
Oh, yes. However, instead of asking the court for leniency, as one might expect, he was defiant to the end.
No alegaré, admitiré culpa ni me arrastraré frente a los Estados
I
Unidos.
will not plead, admit guilt, or grovel in front of the United States, he said. Instead, he chose to deliver a 2-hour tirade in which he insulted our U.S. military and president.
Acuso a George Herbert Walker Bush de ejercer
I
su poder.
accuse George Herbert Walker Bush of exercising his power and authority to influence and subvert the American judicial system in order to convict me.
I'm sure that didn't make the judge very happy.
Nope. He was subsequently sentenced to 40 years in prison.
And is he still there?
Nope.
No?
After a brief extradition to France in 2010 to face accusations for human rights violations he committed there, he was extradited back to Panama in 2011 to serve time for crimes committed during his reign in Panama. And there he died at the age of 83.
I see.
Now, here's a weird fact. Did you know that the U.S. military blasted loud rock music outside the embassy day and night for several days before Noriega finally surrendered? Rumor has it the 1965 hit, I Fought the Law,
And the law won?
was played, along with such other pointedly titled songs as Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, Give It Up by Casey and the Sunshine Band, and The Party's Over by Journey. Some say it was psychological warfare because Noriega despised rock music. However, the official report from the Joint Chiefs of Staff say the music was played to prevent eavesdropping on the negotiations.
Rock music used as psychological warfare. A strange tactic, but hey, I say whatever works. There are lots of interesting stories in this museum.
Which one should we learn about next?